Hello, welcome to Curious Lorenzo, a podcast where I research in real time topics that I'm curious about. Today, the topic I want to talk about is populations, and in particular, populations of humans. I have always been really interested in populations of cities and states and countries. A lot of my curiosity is rooted in the curiosity I gathered as a kid, hanging out on the living room floor of my grandpa's house, studying encyclopedias and atlases and all the different books that he had. So geography and populations has been on the top of my interest just because of the influence of my grandpa. In fact, in this room where I am right now, I have a lot of his atlases that I inherited after he passed away. So, let's see, I'm looking at 3 of them. And I would spend many hours with these atlases looking at, the different shapes of the land masses, the outlines of the different cities in different regions. Also, my dad is a land surveyor, and he did obviously surveying property. You measure the areas, and then you make a map out of it. So maps and surveying and populations and geography has always been really interesting to me. I can tell you just by memory what the shape of the city limits of the city of Santa Fe is, just because I studied that map in particular over and over and over. When I was a kid, I knew the population of Santa Fe, which was around 50,000, and by the time, and I can look this up to verify here in a minute, but by the time I graduated high school, I would say the population of Santa Fe was about 75,000. That's a rough ballpark. I knew the ranks of the different population of the different cities in the state I grew up in, which was New Mexico. Of course, Albuquerque being number 1. For a while, I think Santa Fe was number 2, then Las Cruces. But see, these are the sorts of things that get me really excited for whatever reason. I don't know why, but I now know I know those populations have changed. So Albuquerque has always been the largest city in the state. But now Las Cruces is the second, and I'm going to guess 110,000, maybe 100,000. Then you have Santa Fe after that, then Rio Rancho. Maybe. I might be wrong. I'm going to definitely look those up. But I've been interested in these things, and finding out why these populations grow or why they decrease, or why do they jump up and down. And I started that interest with my own state of New Mexico, but then as a kid, I would wonder, what's the biggest city in the United States, the country I live in? Of course, New York City has held that title for a very long time. What are the second biggest city, third? Why do these city populations go up and down? Cities like Detroit, which has really drastically fluctuated. Why did it go up and down? And what cities are booming now? These are things that I'll just casually sort of look up now, even as an adult, but have historically just been really interested in. I remember when I was a kid, my grandpa telling me the largest population-wise city on Earth was Mexico City. And I know my grandpa went to Mexico City a few times. He had a very deep passion, I guess, with Mexican culture and the country of Mexico. He would go there occasionally. He was a musician. He played Mexican music, specifically mariachi music. I'm trying to anglicize, I guess. I don't know if that's an okay thing to say, but as a kid, we'd say mariachi. And I don't even know if I'm saying that right as far as like accents wise, but that's how we said it, mariachi. But anyways, like he was a mariachi musician. He played mariachi music. Um, and he would tell me about Mexico City and how many people live there. And living in Santa Fe, which I thought Santa Fe was an all right city, like as far as population, I thought, oh, this is a pretty big city. We even have a bus system, and we have a mall. We have two malls. Um, there's an arcade. I thought, like growing up in Santa Fe, I thought, oh, this is pretty great. Like we have a pretty big city. But then my grandpa opened my kind of worldview of things, like my mind, and it was like sort of a mind blow situation when he was telling me, oh, Mexico City has millions of people. So I'm trying to understand this number, millions of people, in comparison to Santa Fe's 50,000. I thought 50,000, that's a lot. That's a lot of people. But then you try to imagine that with tens of millions, and your mind just like, it's like, wow, how does this happen? How do tens of millions of people live in one place? So, yeah, it's a really cool point of fascination for me. I have not recently looked up what the largest cities in the world are, or the largest cities, or what the current populations of the state I grew up in, which is New Mexico. I would also like to know what the populations of the cities in the state I'm living in now, which is Oregon. And just some other big cities that are exploding, and I want to explore like why are they exploding, or why are there some cities populations that are going down, and I kind of just want to have a low key sort of fun podcast with this. So let's take a look. Let me start with the state of New Mexico. So New Mexico is it's got a very colorful history. Lots of different people have had their hands on New Mexico over the centuries. Of course, the original, people who've lived in New Mexico have lived there for thousands of years. Native American people, Pueblo people, accumulating along rivers and places where there's water, and forming communities, and they've lived there for thousands of years. But then, of course, in the 1500s, 1600s, Spanish began to explore, looking for cities of gold, which they never found because there aren't any. But they did explore New Mexico, and there's a lot of controversy about that right now because, it's a long story, but they weren't great people when they were here. Of course, I mean, it's the same story with any other Europeans that go to North America. They kind of just take what they want, and it's not a good story. But that's part of the story anyway. Spanish came and had some settlements there. The first one being, I think, San Juan. It's north of Española, New Mexico. And, they settled Santa Fe and then Albuquerque. And there's all these other different settlements along the Rio Grande. And, of course, folks moving west have settled. Westward expansion from the East Coast settled in New Mexico. And so there's lots of different people who settled New Mexico, but the population of New Mexico itself has been really low as far as, in comparison to the other 50 states. But let's take a look. New Mexico populations. So Albuquerque is the most populous city in the state of New Mexico. I'm looking at a website I don't even know what website this is or if it's reputable. This NewMexicoDemographics.com says that Albuquerque has a population of 559,374, which seems this seems pretty accurate. Las Cruces 102,102. That seems accurate. Rio Rancho 96,210. Santa Fe 83,922. Roswell 47,941. Farmington 45. And then South Valley, which is surprising to me. I guess South Valley is an unincorporated city, which is it's a neighborhood in the southern part of the city of Albuquerque. So I knew that it was not part of Albuquerque, but I didn't know it was its own sort of city. So South Valley has 40,080, and then Clovis, Hobbs, Alamogordo. These are all southwestern and western cities, close to the Texas border. But yeah, these are and I'm just gonna go with this. This seems pretty accurate. Albuquerque being the most populous city. So those are the cities of New Mexico. So not super populous as a state. The city or the state of New Mexico. Let's see, I'm looking it up just to double check. But yeah, the population of New Mexico is 2.097 million people. So 2,097,000 people, which is not a lot when you look at it in comparison to other Western states. Arizona has 7,279,000. Colorado 5,759,000. And then of course Texas, one of the most populous states in the country, 29 million. And then of course California being the most populous state with way more than that. I don't have that figure right in front of me, but yeah, I mean Utah being the closest, I guess, with 3,206,000. So New Mexico has definitely grown since I was a kid. You know, back when I was a kid, the population of New Mexico was about 1.4 million. Now it's over 2 million. So that's a pretty big increase. Western states have been growing really fast in comparison to like the eastern states, which might have even seen some population declines. And I think a lot of that has to do with, you know, maybe that's the good weather. Maybe there's opportunities in different industries. A lot of those industries in the you know, like the Rust Belt and the East Coast have moved overseas. So people are, you know, working in different areas, different places. So, you know, it's interesting to think about why those populations have changed. But New Mexico is one of those states that have really been growing because it's a Western state, although it has not been growing as fast as other Western states, which also makes me wonder. I'm wondering why is this? Like in the last 10 years, I'm looking at this graph on Google right now. You can see the last 10 years, New Mexico has sort of plateaued. Like it's still growing population-wise, but not as fast as, say, like a Utah. So, for example, I'm looking at this graph on Google, and back in 2011, the population of New Mexico is 2,008,000 people, and Utah was 2.8 million. And you look at let's see, 2019, which is the last data that Google has, and New Mexico has 2.097. Yeah, so I mean, it's really sort of just flat the last 10 years. But in comparison, Utah has gained, you know, 200,000 people. So kind of interesting to me as to why that's happening. I mean, it could be politics. It could be how people view New Mexico. I'm not really sure. But I don't know. Anyways, yeah, let's look at Oregon. Oregon, largest cities by population. So this is from a website. Oh, the same website. It looks like the same style of website as that other one I was looking at for New Mexico. It's Oregon-demographics.com. But you have Portland, which is the city I live in, 645,291, which doesn't seem like a lot. Because, Portland is a big city. It's a major city in the Pacific Northwest. But there's other smaller cities that have really like bigger populations in this area. So just like Albuquerque has Rio Rancho, which has what did I say, like 100,000 people. Portland has 5 Rio Ranchos surrounding it. I don't know 5, but it has Beaverton, it has Tigard, it has Hillsborough, has Gresham, Oregon City, like all these other little suburbs that are surrounding Vancouver, Washington, that are all surrounding, that makes the city seem bigger. And it is bigger population-wise because there's all these other little cities. Albuquerque just has basically just Rio Rancho and the South Valley, I guess. There are other smaller communities like Moriarty and Edgewood and the East Mountains. And then to the south, you have Los Lunas. But Portland, all of that's all just clumped together. And it's a bigger city population-wise for the metro area. But so Portland, 645,000. Salem, which is the capital of Oregon, 169,000. Eugene, that's where the University of Oregon is, 168,000. Gresham, which is a suburb of Portland, 110,000. Hillsborough, another suburb of Portland, 106,000. Beaverton, suburb of Portland, 97,000. And then Bend, which is in, I think it's south central or north central Oregon. It's more of like a high deserty sort of climate, not very, it's not like the weather here in Portland where it rains a lot in the winter time. They are on the other side of the Cascade Range. And Bend is 93,000, that's more than I thought it was. So it's like in comparison to Santa Fe, a bit bigger than Santa Fe. Medford is on the coast, I believe, in south west Oregon, closer to California. 81,145. Springfield, I have no idea where that is. 62,077. Corvallis, I don't know where that is either, but I think that is the city where Oregon State University is, and that's 58,000. Aloha, didn't even know that was a city in Oregon, 54,287. Albany, 53,000. Tigard, which is a suburb of Portland, 53,000. Lake Oswego, one of the richest communities in the state, also a suburb of Portland, 39,000. And then it goes on and on to other cities that are much smaller. But there are a lot of cities that are above 10,000 in the state of Oregon, which is pretty interesting. The population of Oregon, according to Google, is 4,218,000. In comparison to other Pacific Northwest states, you have Washington to the north of us, with 7,615,000. Of course, Washington has Seattle and it has Olympia and it has all those coastal cities with ship ports and lots of industry, lots of tech. They have Microsoft. They have all these other, Amazon. They have all these other big companies in Washington. So lots and lots of, I guess, opportunity. Lots of, they have an economy that can support that many people. And Oregon's getting there too, I guess. But Oregon is much smaller population-wise than Washington, and does look like, I'm looking at the curve, and the curve for growth in Washington is much steeper. Not much steeper, but it is a bit steeper than the one for Oregon. Idaho looks like it's growing a bit. Idaho, didn't know this, so Idaho has less people than New Mexico. Idaho has 1,787,000 people. And I'm pretty sure their largest city is Boise. Yeah. So yeah, those are some just real quick stats of some states that I've been thinking about as far as population is concerned. Now I wanted to know, what are the largest cities with populations in the world? So this is interesting to me. So I'm just going to go through the list and just sort of, read what I see. So this is from Wikipedia, but the largest city when we're going off of population in the world is Tokyo, Japan. And there's different figures that you can go off of when you're looking at population. One category looks like UN 2018 population estimates. Then you can go to the city proper, which I was talking about, like just what's inside the city limits, just like how Oregon, just like how Portland has all these other different suburbs. The city proper of, Portland, the population is 600 some thousand, right? But the metropolitan area includes all of that, all of the other surrounding cities. So I'll just go through all of them. I guess the real figure, what Wikipedia ranks, is the UN 2018 population estimate. And for Tokyo, that's 37,400,068. 37 million people plus live in Tokyo, Japan. I have a hard time of wrapping my head around that number. The metro area for Albuquerque, which is the city that I am the most familiar with living in. I've spent most of my life in New Mexico, and over, probably around 20 years of my life I've spent in Albuquerque. So I know of, hang on, let me see here. I'm trying to Google and talk at the same time. I am familiar with Albuquerque the metro area the most. And the metro area population, according to Google, is 915,927, so not quite a million. But Albuquerque is not small. Area-wise, it's huge. It's a big area-wise. Population density is, I would say, decent as far as cities are concerned, but we're less than 1 million people. And in Tokyo, Japan, it's like 37 times more people than Albuquerque, which is just crazy to me. Number two, I'll mention the population density too, because I think that's important. So the population density for Tokyo is, I guess it doesn't tell me on this, but the area is 13,452 kilometers squared, which is a very simple calculation to find people per square kilometer. But to do that for each city, I'm not going to do that. I'll just say the area, 13,452 square kilometers. So that's a pretty big chunk of area. The next city, number 2 on the list, is Delhi, India. Of course, India being the second most populous country in the world after China. I've also seen some estimates that India is going to surpass China really, really soon in population growth. And there is a really cool population calculator on worldometers.info, which tells you the current population, and it uses the birth and death rate to kind of make this calculation in real time. And I'll just sort of mention this at the beginning, right here in the middle of the podcast or whatever point this is. What the population is of the world is 7,847,047,974. I'll mention this as I'm closing out, and we'll see how many people Earth added. But today there have been 217,000 births so far. There have been 91,000 deaths so far. And we've netted a growth of 126,000 people just today. China being the most populous country in the world, 1,442,000. India, 1,338,000,000. I said the number for China wrong again. 1,442,000,000. India, 1,388,000,000. And then a very distant third is the United States with 332,253,000 people. Indonesia, fourth, Pakistan, then Brazil, Nigeria, Bangladesh, Russia, Mexico number 10, Japan number 11, Ethiopia, Philippines, Egypt, Vietnam, Democratic Republic of Congo, Turkey, Germany, Iran, and Thailand are the top 20. But it's pretty incredible to me that China and India being 1 and 2, and then in a very, very distant third, United States. It's interesting how that works out. But back to the list of cities. So India, the number 2 most populous country in the world. Delhi is the second most populous city in the world, of 28,514,000, with a much smaller area than Tokyo of 3,483 square kilometers. Number 3 is Shanghai, China, 25,582,000. Sao Paulo, Brazil, 21,650,000. And then Mexico City, which I remember as a kid being the most populous city in the world, is now 5th on the list with 21,581,000. So, and then after that's Cairo, Egypt, which that kind of surprises me. I had no idea Cairo, Egypt had 20 million people, but it does. Mumbai, India, 19 million. Beijing, China, 19,618,000. Here's a city a city on this list which I have never heard of before today. Maybe I've heard of it, but it's not like on the top of my radar as far as largest cities. Is Dhaka, Bangladesh. Then with 19,578,000. Osaka, Japan, with 19,281,000. And then finally, down this list is the largest city of the United States, New York City. 18,819,000. A lot of people live in New York City. But if you, in comparison, look at that to Tokyo, Delhi, and Shanghai, it is not quite as much, especially Tokyo. But 18 million people is still a lot to cram into a small area. Yeah, and it keeps going. Karachi, Pakistan. Had never heard of that city. Buenos Aires, Argentina. Another city in China I've never heard of, Chongqing, with 14,838,000. Istanbul, Turkey. Here's a city in India I have not heard of. Maybe I have. Kolkata. Then Manila, Philippines. Lagos, Nigeria, with 13 million. Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, 13 million. A Chinese city I've never heard of, Tianjin. No, I've heard of Tianjin. I keep saying I haven't heard of them, then I realize I have. Kinshasa, Congo, 13 million. Have not heard of that city, and I know that I have not. Guangzhou, China, 12 million. And then another U.S. city, Los Angeles, with 12,458,000. And then after LA is Moscow. And I'm not going to go through the entire list, but lots and lots of cities over 5 million people. Yeah, interesting stuff to me. Let's see, largest cities in the U.S. So largest cities in the USA. Going off of this Wikipedia article. All right, so New York City, in a 2019 estimate, 8,336,000. So that last figure that we were looking at must have been the metro area. In fact, I'm pretty sure it was the metro area because this number that I'm reading is different than the number I'm reading on this Wikipedia article, which says, and I'm going back to it right now, 18,819,000. So that must include like Newark, New Jersey, and all the surrounding areas. Yeah, it does, because I'm looking here at the city proper on that same graph, and it's saying 8 million people. Which now I'm wondering, what is the most populous city with city proper? That would be Chongqing, China, 30 million. Wait a second, this is interesting to me because the UN 2018 population estimate for that's 14 million. Yeah, I don't know how these numbers work. They're just all over the place. But yeah, for the United States, New York City, 8,336,000. Los Angeles, 3,979,000. Then Chicago, number 3. Chicago is the only top 10 city in the United States that has shown any decline in population, which makes sense. A lot of those Midwestern sort of Great Lakes, Rust Belt cities tend to show declines, I'm guessing because winters are cold AF. But and a lot of the industries are moving to warmer areas in western places. But Chicago is number 3, 2,693,000. Number 4 is Houston, 2,320,000. Phoenix is number 5. That's surprising to me. Had a 16% growth rate. Yeah, I have some thoughts about Phoenix. It's way too hot for me, but it apparently is a very nice place for lots and lots of people. Over, 1.5 million people. Philadelphia, number 6, 1,584,000. San Antonio, Texas, 1,547,000. San Diego, California, 1,423,000. Dallas, Texas, 1,343,000. San Jose, California, over 1 million. Then that's the last city in the United States that has broken 1 million people for the city proper. And then number 11 is 978,000, Austin, Texas. Then Jacksonville, then Fort Worth, Columbus, Ohio, Charlotte, North Carolina, San Francisco, Indianapolis, Seattle, Denver, Washington, D.C., Boston, El Paso, Nashville, Detroit. This is one of those cities that I think, historically has been in the top 5 population, but now is down number 24 with 670,000. Yeah, you can see the estimate from the 2010 census for Detroit was 713,000, and then 2019 estimates 670,000. So quite a change. Then number 25 is Oklahoma City. 26, Portland, then Las Vegas, Memphis, Louisville, Baltimore, Milwaukee. Number 32, Albuquerque, New Mexico, with 560,513, had a 2.69 increase in population since the 2010 census. But yeah, lots and lots of different places with different cultures. I kind of wonder if I can sort this table to see which ones grew the most. Yeah, I can. Frisco, Texas went from the 2010 census of 116,989 to the 2019 population of 200,490. So that's huge. Then Macon, Georgia, Meridian, Idaho, McKinley, Texas. So lots of Texas cities are showing huge increases in population. And they're not going through a fun time right now, as most people know, with their power outages. I learned a lot about their power grid. Shout out to the New York Times podcast with Michael Barbaro, where they talked about the grid in Texas and how jacked up it is. Just to avoid federal regulation, they're isolated. And now they're basically in a really bad shape because they don't have water and they don't have electricity and people are freezing. So not a good time for our Texans. But of the top performers for growth since 2010, most of these are Texas cities. There's Kent, Washington. There's Irvine, California on there. Murfreesboro, Tennessee is on there. Oh, Bend, Oregon is on there. Indiana, Carmel, Indiana. Cary, North Carolina, Henderson, Nevada. I think it's close to Las Vegas, and then Austin, Texas, is the first biggest city that I see has a big change in population. And then Seattle, Washington saw 23% growth. That's really good. But yeah, really interesting little graph here. So I'll link this in the show notes. But yeah, I think that's all I have for this one. Kind of a fun sort of exploration. Sometimes I'll just search populations of different places and just kind of imagine what those places are like and what what goes on in those different communities. And it sounds like it's just numbers, and I mean it kind of is just numbers, I guess, but when I'm looking at these population graphs, my head starts to take me on these little journeys to these different places. And of course you can't see it on a podcast, but when I'm Googling or I'm searching these different places, a lot of times it's paired with different photographs, maybe a photograph of the skyline of the different cities. And you get a glimpse of what's going on in that city that you're researching. And it's really, allows you to imagine what it's like to go there. And if I really want to dig deep, I can open up Google Earth and kind of take a 3D tour of what the city looks like, what the buildings look like. Then if I want to go into some rabbit holes, I can look at the tallest skyscrapers in the downtown area or the skyline of the city and see the architecture and see when these buildings were built. Find out when they were built. Find out the different companies that are there. It's kind of a way to travel to an area without actually physically going there. Even though, like, one day I do want to do a lot of traveling. Right now, I can't leave Portland, but I can sort of travel by trying to understand what these different places are like. So it's kind of a cool thing for me to do, even though I haven't really done it in a while. This is fun to me. But yeah, hope you enjoyed it. And I will talk to you on the next one.